All right, this roundtable will be in Russian. The interpreter will have to work a little harder now. But we will discuss not science, but business and the real world, and it's going to be in Russian. So yesterday I invited some colleagues to participate in this roundtable as panelists, so I'd like to ask them to the table right now. No. I think Sergey, Mikhail. Okay, Vadim, you're also welcome. Okay, distinguished colleagues, this roundtable will be dedicated to commercializing quantum cryptography. And, well, I understand that commercializing is something of a very broad thing. Some people think that it is quite enough to want to make money and so on and so forth. In the process of this roundtable, I would just like to touch upon at least two issues on commercialization. Quantum cryptography as a concept was born about 40 years ago. About 25 years ago, the first systems appeared, and about 15 years ago, the world got first production systems. However, well, you can't say that people make a lot of money on them, and I would say even vice versa. All known usages of these systems are either just for image or PR, or just for the demonstration of academic principles. So the question is why? We all discuss all those quantum systems and implementations, and of course we understand that this is the future that has come true today. Why cannot we move into the future? There are a lot of different aspects. First of all, very few people understand why their classic security systems should be replaced by quantum security systems. I don't know whether this is a problem really, but a lot of people are asking this question. And even though this technology is evolving, quantum systems are still considerably more expensive than classic ones. That may also be a problem, but remember, 30 years ago, a mobile phone cost thousands of dollars, and today everyone owns more than one mobile phone. Maybe, of course, this is the matter of the inertia, psychological inertia. People are afraid of the new things. And actually, not a single government that I know of has officially said that they think that quantum key distribution systems have a guarantee of being more secure than classic systems, and therefore governments do not push the private sector and the government sector to use quantum cryptography. So I would like to ask my colleagues to give us their opinion why this technology has not come into broad use by industry. Hi everyone, I'm Sergey Khanenkov, Rostelecom. I think Alexey set the theme very rightly, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. Of course, this is just point, okay? First of all, it would be, I think, a little bit of an overstatement to say that we are ready for production. Only Infotecs says that we have a ready production system, and only point-to-point. Myself, as a telecom company, requires a one-to-many communication, not one-to-one communication. Of course, one-to-one communication is also pretty interesting because we have a service, for example, a super secure channel of communication between data centers, and we provide such a service, and if you rent several racks in racks in two data centers, you can also rent a secure channel between them in two different data centers. And in future, we hope we will have quantum security on such a channel. Rostelecom is a Russian leader on data centers. We have more than 50% of the market, so we have tens of thousands of racks rented out to third-party customers, and of course almost 25% of those racks have their own encryptors, and most of them are 10 megabit to 100 megabit. Gigabit encryptors are very rare, and we understand that the more the volume of information that you transmit, the more frequently you need to change the key. So encryption becomes really critical. So there is one strategy that we can assume. One is evolutional, just to wait and see. For Infotecs, for SPB ITMO and others, I don't know. Whoever comes up with this, we will look at it with interest. We have a plan of providing such services. But if you ask me how many of those implementations there will be, I will tell you that it will be hundreds, not thousands, and not tens of thousands, because the equipment remains very, very expensive. I think in the previous school, Alexey and I had this discussion, and I can repeat my position, how much it should cost. It should cost no more than a couple of encryptors, and I think right now quantum costs much more, several times more than encryptor. And how much does an encryptor? This is a patent on this question. Okay, we're not talking about encryptors. I would just like to comment on Sergey's point that we are not yet ready. Well, Russia maybe is not a leader here. I mean, abroad, there are people who can provide you right now with a couple of quantum key encryptors. But I think the lag between Russia and the whole world is months rather than years. I'm not saying that Russia is behind. Well, first of all, Russian companies, especially the Russian state-owned company, will not use international equipment. Maybe if our respected regulator gave them the certificate, we would, but otherwise, if it is uncertified, well, it would be a fool's errand to do it. We know how much ID Quantic wants for a pair of such equipment. I don't think it's a big secret. And it's more or less the same price tag that is being dangled by the Russian producer. I mean, more or less the same. But the point is, who is going to pay for this? So people pay to us 100 to 150 rubles per month for organizing such a service. So this is the economics of this. So if you're secure, if the encryptor secures equipment which is by an order of magnitude more expensive than the encryptor itself, it's okay. But if the encryptor costs the same as this equipment, they will do that. They will do that only if the government tells them to. That, of course, that you will have to have the key, the quantum key, and the quantum key needs to be changed once a minute. Right now, some of the encrypted services change their keys once a year. So this would be a revolutionary way. An evolutionary way is to actually wait for early adopters, for some bank to say, we are the first quantum secured bank. For example, Gazprom Bank. They are pretty advanced there, and they will say, this is the first quantum secure transaction. We're great, and so on and so forth. But if you want a revolutionary way, you need to go to the regulator and persuade them. And I think if Russia has a law on critical infrastructure, on the security of critical infrastructure, it was adopted on the 1st of January last year, and if you lobby for amendments to this law, that in some sites of the critical infrastructure, because the critical infrastructure also has several tiers according to that law, so for the top tier of critical infrastructure, it's like, a digital power station okay? Digital management for power stations. So it has to use encryption with quantum key distribution. It's just like the Yarovaya package. All the telecom operators now, on a mandatory basis, have to record everything that is said over their telephone networks, right? And no one can kind of argue against that because this is the law. So if you lobby successfully for amendments to this law, this is going to be simple, right? Otherwise, we will have to wait for early adopters. And do you know how many devices ID Quantique sells per year, per whatever? How many they have sold already? As far as I know, they have sold 100 plus. Do you know? Hundreds, right? Hundreds. Well, I don't know, but I mean, I think this is the right estimate. Maybe not 100, maybe several hundred, but that's it. So that's ID Quantique for you. I've been to China in December, and I've talked to them, to these guys Vadim has shown you. So they have 32 nodes. That means 64 sets. Microphone, please. So they may have 1,000, and that is, you know, a top estimate, 1,000. And with the current approach, we will have the same number of units. In fact, even classic 10 gigabit encryptors are not cheap, right? If the government tells us to, we will have to do this. Otherwise, well, okay, we will install it. Some people will probably buy this service just for image, and you know, but it's not going to be massively used in the near future. Thank you for this. Now, let's look at what the provider of components and equipment. Yes, I represent Concept Technology, that it has to be mandated by law. Russia has started a lot of national projects and has allocated really a lot of money for national infrastructure. But the bad practice in this country is that they first think of a law, then they write a law, they adopt a law, and then they think what this law is all about. And there is really a lot of bureaucracy in trying to change a bad law afterwards. So I think we will have to fight this situation. Well, not fight exactly, but you know what I mean. On a legal level. Because yes, this is a little bit on the expensive side. And not everyone is aware about what quantum communications are about. Because when I talk to my customers, they say, wow, but what is it? Is this, you know, is this a new thing for the whole world? Yes, apart from the academic community, definitely. I can tell you what kind of everybody knows. In the past 18 months, we've been very proactively reaching out to customers like banks, like state corporations, and others. So you couldn't say that the top customers are not aware of this. Small and medium businesses, they're not interested, but transport and energy companies, well, Russian Railways is really responsible for the whole part of quantum communications because they really need it. They run a huge telecommunications network. So last year during the QTS, you could say that people are not aware of this. This year you just cannot say so. There is not much media hype, but well, people who have money know about this. People who don't have money shouldn't know about this. This is my opinion. Now, Pavel. Sergey has announced it. Maybe people don't know. Russian Railways is really responsible for the development of quantum communication. I'm Pavel Dorozhkin. I represent both Russian Railways and Skoltech. But I'm not officially here. I'm not wearing the Russian Railways hat. During the Rus Crypto conference, Russian Railways will voice its official position. I will talk as a professional engineer, as someone who has arrived from optics into quantum key distribution, looking at it with a freshman's eye. I also was a manufacturer of quantum systems. And this is the unofficial and personal position of mine. the technology push and market pull. Market pull starts when people on the market have a headache, and people don't care how exactly you will relieve me of my headache, but they can pay money. And technology push is something different. So they have a technology that is looking for a solution. And it's good when this technology is cheap, but when this technology is expensive, it's double bad, because they have to create a market for this technology, and they have to persuade the market that this is the right technology for them. And we are in a classic technology push situation with QKD. The physicists have done their job. I think that repeaters and quantum memory are not just around the corner, so the roadmap is pretty clear in front of us. All the presentations here have been of engineering persuasion. So now, the legal part of the job need to start working with regulators, working with markets, with the industry, and of course the players need to lobby for their position through the regulator, need to persuade the regulator that their technology is worthy of finding a market. These times are good for us because there is a lot of hype about quantum supremacy, about quantum computer. People may believe it or not. This is a debatable issue, and actually there is no such thing as a bad debate because it heats up the public interest and creates additional motivation for users. But users are not motivated enough to pay 2 or 3 times more than for classic security. Optical systems become miniaturized, integral systems, systems on a chip, and so on. Every week, every month, we get new publications like transceivers on a chip, random number generators on a chip, and if it is miniaturized, it will become cheaper too. Sergey, correct me if I'm wrong. So, if QKD cost will be 10% of the cost of the classic information traffic, I don't think people will ask questions about whether this is quantum or not. I mean, if there is a problem and if people need to pay only 10% more to have this problem solved once and for all, maybe they will pay it. So looking at the private sector, what is the plus X% that the private sector will to pay for this? Well, I've brought this up already. 10%, yes, I would say so. 10%, they will overpay 10% for knowing that they have a quantum key, and they will not have any headache for systems with systems generating and distributing that key. Well, they will still have a bit of that headache, but not as much as they have today. We are currently running 3,000 to 4,000 encryptors. We have a whole team in Samara, in central Russia, to look at this fleet. So maybe plus 10% is okay. I mean, the point is that information security people are the people who are resistant to this change, because if this is implemented, businesses will need a lot fewer security people, and security people don't like that. Okay, just to finish my point, we have a moment of truth right now. We are at a critical juncture. There is hype, which clearly warms up the market. At the same time, government says that this is a priority. Maybe this will be backed up with some money. With these two factors, I think working with the regulator, working with the end users, working with traffic generators, it could be a thing for the future. And, well, it should not be a thing for the future, but, you know, people have been writing roadmaps for 18 months now, and Rostelecom has been working, so I need a lot more people working rather than writing roadmaps. Anyone can write roadmaps. So, well, we are working too, and I think Alexey will comment on this. Well, we do understand that we are competitors to a certain extent, but nonetheless, let's calm down this discussion. I do understand about economics, I do understand about the legal part of the job, but is there a problem in the technology? Is there an engineering problem? I've heard assertions that even if the protocol is proven secure, the implementation of this protocol can happen. So, ID Quantique, for example, has gone a very long way forward, but they still have a lot of homework to do. What about others? Is the technology ready? Well, on the one hand, it is ready. There are commercial solutions, you can use them, and within several years they will pass through formal certification, and there are publications of informal certification, so it looks okay. But I remember one thing, right? So you have quantum random number generator on the market, and quantum random number generators are sold in much more numbers because it is good for casinos, servers, lotteries, and classic cryptography. It is not very big, it is pretty cheap. I think ID Quantique has a product that costs about $1,000. This is a small box, 5 by 5 centimeters, $1,000. It makes random numbers. And they've been selling them for 10 years already, and I think 6 or 7 years ago there was a conference, and there was a question from the industry. They make mobile phones, and they say, well, this is not good enough for mobile phones. And Nicolas Josène from Genève, the professor, he asked the industry, what should be the size and what should be the cost, quantum random number generator, to integrate it into mobile phones? And the answer was several square millimeters and maximum $10 per unit. And last year, ID Quantique has come to the market with such a product. So commercialization, you mean, is not about big boxes and formidable boxes. Quantum technologies and quantum cryptography can be cheap and useful. Well, just ask the industry, why is it so expensive? We want it this size and this price, and do whatever you want, but give us this size and this price. And I think there will be a company on the other side of the fence which will make it. But I think right now this is a rhetorical question. Well, is it a rhetorical question or is it a requirement specification? If quantum cryptography is miniaturized to a certain extent, and if it is cheaper, there will be implementations. So, will you implement them? Or you don't know, for example, if it is, even if it is small anyway. So is it about, really, this is a good question. Is it about technology or is it about psychology? Is it about, history? It's about inertia, bureaucracy, and so on. Maybe there will be no big answers right now. And this brings me to the second issue I wanted to touch upon. Rostelecom, several years ago, tested Russian QKD systems on their real line. And every producer, of course, tried to advertise the best characteristics, the characteristics that turned out to be better than others, right? But the question is, which characteristics are important for the end user? QKD is part of information security. And that means that the requirement should not come from within the system, should not come from technology side. It should come from the usage side, how frequently you need to change the keys, how many keys you want, and so on. What are the characteristics that are important for the end user? This is my question. So we have just heard that not everybody likes big and formidable black boxes. Well, in fact, black boxes, if they are 19 inches wide, they are installed very well in a rack, and a data center would be okay with this. We don't know whether a quantum system whether a quantum system size 1 centimeter can be made, but maybe, according to what I know from technology, you can miniaturize it to the size of a CD-ROM, I think. So I'd like to ask Sergey, since you have more than half of the Russian market of the data centers, maybe you are the customer, you can tell us. Well, we have seen, we have tested, and we even tried to make service prototypes, and on the St. Petersburg forum we even made a quantum network, and there was a record of distance between Moscow and Kazan with this superconductive encryptors and so on. So we need, I would say, operators class equipment. It must integrate into our existing network infrastructure like plug and play. Now this is not so. We have to, for example, adjust the equipment for 1 day or for 2 days, and very expensive people do this. All the interfaces that we have seen, well, these are, command strings and so on. This is a hello from the 1990s, right? So there is no GUI to think about. Not a single producer. Infotecs, for example, I have a favorite question to them. When are you going to integrate a GUI? We have quite a lot of Infotecs units in our network, and they have this great system that manages all these hardware and software SCSIs and so on. But in this incarnation, for example, in these black boxes, and they say you can buy it tomorrow, or if you have money, you can buy it even today, they still don't have a graphic user interface. So you buy it, you want a VPNet, and they will say, wait for the pop-up too. And of course, I would need a user interface for people. I don't want to teach my people from scratch all over again. This is the software part. The hardware part is even worse. And I have an issue even with Infotecs now, right? It really doesn't work in our optical networks, doesn't work on WDM. The Japanese, the Chinese have the systems for this maybe, but I mean, Rostelecom does not have enough optical channels to use it. And you really wonder why you wanted outside the networks where you can use the same channel for information and for the key. And you want also a synchronization channel, and which makes the situation even worse. I would not say the situation is bad, but this is a very cumbersome situation that we're in if you want to use it. And if you relieve us of this headache, well, this is economically a big headache too, because you have to lay an optical fiber, and you have to add this to the costs. And you cannot sell it, you just cannot tell the customer, hey, I had to lay 100 kilometers of fiber just to give you this service. I'm not that much interested in the characteristics, how often you change the key and so on. At this stage of maturity, we are fine with the technology itself. But, I mean, we've been working with real-life networks for more than a year now, and there are no solutions that take into account the real status of our networks. Andrei Zhilaev yesterday gave you a very good presentation about what can be done. And I think you've seen what is on the screen. So there are a lot of drawings, there are a lot of great pictures, but we don't want drawings with optical switches and other things, right? There are a lot of issues rightly touched upon, by the way, about standardization and so on. when you have to build the network and when you have to sell the network, you have to sell the same backbone to a lot of customers. For example, our newest data center will have 4,800 racks. And if we only have point-to-point solutions, this will be, abysmal economics. If you have one backbone and you sell this backbone and all the keys go through this backbone to a lot of different customers, then the economics becomes advantageous. But there are no solutions like this. So, of course, we must really congratulate one another that during this school we have found out about the solution, the point-to-point solution that is soon to be certified finally, but point-to-point is a far cry from, a network solution. On WDWDM, yeah, the same thing. They've been talking to us. Maybe when Russian railways start working on this, I know that you're serious, I know that this is a big government responsibility, I know that your locomotives tend to be powerful if you really set to motion, so that's my vision of this. I have a question to Mikhail. Okay, what we get from the QKD system are based on the characteristics of components that we use. Vadim, for example, dangled this curator 1 gigahertz system. I think 1 gigahertz is the photon rate, and this could be the basis for the key generation rate, maybe. Should we expect evolutionary or breakthrough development in the future? Maybe some components are just around the corner that will improve the characteristics or that will make it much cheaper than currently is. Well, this is the situation where the market has to dictate. See? But what are the physical limits? I mean, I don't know that the laser can send photons at a frequency of 10 to power 18 hertz, right? For example, can it become small enough? Because, for example, a dry silicon detector is pretty small, but a superconductive detector is pretty big because you have to cool it down, and that is big in itself. Maybe component people already do something that we in the industry don't see. Maybe there is a new avenue of development in components. Well, I don't think I'm in a position to answer that question. Okay, Pavel, then I have a question to you. Maybe you are a private expert, I understand, but which characteristics you would expect from QKD systems? To avoid a situation when every producer tells you this characteristics is what I can master, and this is the very important thing, because everybody says that if they do it well, this is important. Well, the key generation rate, the distance over the lifetime of a photon. Yeah, that too. Exactly. I agree with Sergey here. And the FSB certificate. Well, if people say 1 gigabit per second, it's okay. I have seen some publications abroad on 10 gigabit, so maybe this is the way to go. But that makes lasers and electronics even more expensive, I would say. Okay, let me rephrase this question. There are two producers. They want to advertise their black boxes, right? And they dangle and advertise some of these characteristics. Which one will you take? No, I don't think I can have an answer for you. Both, yes. Both is a good answer, but it is a pretty expensive answer. I get it. Vadim, what about you? Can you tell me, if I perform an engineering review of quantum systems, is it important, to have a huge key generation rate. Maybe huge key generation rate means that it is insecure. Well, characteristics do improve all the time, both the distance and the rate. So it doesn't make sense to say now that if this particular provider doubled the speed, this gives them a competitive edge. Because this is about commercialization. You see, people look at the figures and people respond to the figures, I mean customers. If in 5 years we know that the rates will grow several times, should you look at the rates now? Well, for example, in China, I know people who choose equipment for speed. They know how many keys they want per second, for example. So, security, distance, and generation rate. Yes, all three are important. I understand that this is not a forum to come to a consensus and every producer will say this is the most important. Well, if you ask me whether this is achievable technologically, I would say it is. We already have something that is by an order of magnitude better than what we had several years ago. So the industry is moving, the industry is, of course, running into the future, and in some time we will all be happy. Well, if you look at what is being on sale now, and if you compare it to the first commercial models, you will see that they are 200 times faster. Can they become even 10 times faster than today? 10 times, yes. Of course, we're looking for expert opinions here. Well, 2 years ago, there was 400 kilometers, and 2 years ago people thought that 400 kilometers is a technical limit. Now they say 600, 700, but this is already at a pretty low rate, about 1 bit per second. But practically, I think it's a no-brainer to double the distance. It's like that triangle, right? You can get 2 out of 3, right? And of course, cost is also part of the equation always. I don't think you can choose 2 out of 3. I don't think they are connected in such a way that you improve 2 and 3, and characteristic number 3 pays for that. Well, maybe number 3 is always the cost. Well, if you are multiplexing with bright classical light, if you do that, distance will suffer. But we listen carefully to you, so we need to develop a system of continuous variables, maybe. In terms of distance, you need some quantum memory. Otherwise, we'll have to build trusted nodes all the time. If you make a cheap quantum memory, I'll be okay with that. I understand that this is a question to the audience. Please try to make quantum memory. And there are some publications, and Sergey has rushed up. Maybe he wanted to tell us about quantum memory. So, I don't want to build trusted nodes every kilometer, so give me quantum memory. Well, one thing we understand about quantum memory is that it is more theory than practice right now. But we see a lot of young people here. Maybe during QTS 10 we will see somewhere in the corner of the room some real physical quantum memory already in black boxes. Well, this is just a little joke of mine, but maybe not just a joke. Another question that pertains to commercialization too. There are some discussions on standardizing quantum cryptography and quantum communications. A small reminder for the Russian status of cryptographic information security. Same industry, several producers, and they do absolutely different things. Electronic signature devices. You buy your electronic signature device from any of those competitors, and every other competitor can validate the other. But encryptors they are absolutely not compatible at all, even though they may use the same protocol that makes the channel secure. This situation has lingered on for quite some time, and customers, I would not say the customers are happy, but customers have put up with it so far. In quantum communication, should industry try to make encryptors compatible with specific providers' devices or with any provider's devices? Will that make commercialization faster, or is there no analogy with the situation with classic encryptors? Oh, it's understood that, for example, Infotecs will have a competitive edge here because they have both encryptors and QKD, but they are the only company like that. Others only make QKD, and they want strategic cooperation with people who make encryptors, and some people already do that. With the current situation on the market, I think, if I did that, I would look at my fleet of encryptors, and of course, the more producers I have, the better it is to me to have universal equipment, because I can buy from a lot of people, and that means that they will become more flexible on price. So Infotecs will also come to me, and they will try to sell to me, but they will not have the monopoly, and that is good for me as the customer. So I think unification is good for me. But this brings me to another question. Should QKD be capable of interoperability? Right? This is an even broader question, and I would say this is even a better question than integrating encryptors. This is the great question. I think this is what we need to discuss when we have market discussions. But I don't know what the situation right now is, but I don't have the answer. Vadim, what do you think about this? Should there be, and will there be, interoperability, a standard for QKD devices? I mean, BB84, whatever. I mean, international committees have not yet been discussing Alice compatibility with another provider's Bob. Chinese colleagues, when they started their work in ISO on standardization, this was actually the first question that they tabled. Let's standardize at least one protocol. They put on the table what they said was the most widespread protocol, but since there is no such a thing as widespread in this industry of thousands of devices across the globe, maybe it is the widest used for quantum C tech, but other producers have their own. So under the pressure from expert community, they decided, okay, we will not standardize the protocol, and then they started to push for the standardization of evaluation techniques, which are. But it was not about interoperability. It was about standardizing their protocol. These are different things. Just to kind of put it straight. Maybe I will make this question more degenerate. So what should support what? Quantum equipment should support many encryptors, or encryptors should support many types of QKD equipment? Okay, let me make this question less degenerate. Now the government says, at least it says, it will support quantum communications, 5G, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So there are some national champions responsible for this, and the ideology of the agreements between the government and those national champions is that the company will keep a normal market situation for small, for medium businesses, and there will be an audit for demonopolization. I mean, at least on paper. This is the philosophy of the current situation. And that, I think, is the answer to your question. So, companies that are currently responsible to the Russian government for the fields, they have to support all existing producers. And that, I think, makes interoperability of protocols, encryptors, and so on a natural thing. Maybe different encryptors will not be interoperable within several different protocols, but if any company decides to create their own closed ecosystem, at least they shouldn't get government support within those roadmaps. Thanks, my dear colleagues. I think we won't be able to answer all commercialization questions, not in 1 hour, not in 2 hours, not in 1 day. But I just hope that our younger colleagues who are still coming to academia, I hope that they understand that whatever is interesting to them right now should be useful to just mere mortals who are outside the academia. This is why we're doing this. It is good that we are preparing the discussion for, I think, higher levels when we talk about costs, about availability, and so on. But this is an endless discussion, I think, and it is good that we have started it. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
Эти вопросы будут бесконечные, мы просто будем выходить на более высокие уровни, там, характеристик, совместимости, о стоимости, о доступности и так далее, но это бесконечный фонд. Поэтому спасибо всем.